Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Wilson Stribling. Welcome to another edition of At Issue, where we discuss and debate the critical issues facing the state of Mississippi and how these issues impact you. At issue tonight, the Trump administration and Mississippi. President Donald Trump is more than halfway through his first year as commander-in-chief. So far, President Trump has focused on several national and international issues, such as the travel ban on select Muslim countries, Russia and its alleged involvement in our government and elections, and replacing Obamacare. But what about Mississippi? Our state is predominantly Republican and overwhelmingly helped elect President Trump. What's in it for us? Will the Trump administration help or hurt Mississippi? MPB's Mark Rigsby caught up with two top state Republicans at the Neshoba County Fair recently, Governor Phil Bryant and State Treasurer Lynn Fitch. He asked about President Trump's performance so far and what the Trump administration means to our state.
Oh, I think he's doing great. I visited with him in the Oval Office perhaps a month ago to talk about infrastructure. And if you look at what is taking place in America, I think the economy is beginning to turn. Low unemployment, growth in the stock market, 70% reduction in illegal crossings on the border. Our United States military is stronger than ever before. Just the other day, the Gerald Ford carrier, oh, by the way, which a portion of which is manufactured by General Atomics in Tupelo, Mississippi, their electronic propulsion system. So I am encouraged by what he is doing. And I think we knew when we voted for him, he was a man of his own mind and would speak from his heart, and that's exactly what he's doing. But he's sticking to his promises, and that's what I think we always say we want elected officials to do. And what he said he was going to do is exactly what he's doing.
I just wanted to see what you think about how he's doing so far.
Well, I think, he's had some challenges and impediments as well. I think there are a lot of unsung actions that have taken place that have not gotten the news that deserve credit. That's just an unfortunate opportunity that was missed to say to the American people different actions have been taken and so forth. However, I will say, when you get to the core principles, I appreciate that. We're angling for less taxes, better quality for the workforce, training, lower taxes and making more government efficiencies happen. So all of those are great conservative core values that I appreciate. He's so interested in business, small business. Some of those things are happening. He's working very diligently on transportation. There are some great federal legislative pieces that are happening. Some have even been passed. Some are by executive action. Certainly you can see healthcare has been on the news. We're looking for some tax reform. But if you think about that, we absolutely need some tax reform, and we need to make it much more simple for people to pay their taxes, to be able to parlay that into economic development and jobs. So I appreciate that, because when it gets down to it, it's like I said just earlier, it's all about jobs, the quality of the workforce, and the retention of people. And so for Mississippi, we want all that to happen, right?
Do you think that the Trump administration is going to be good for Mississippi?
Well, I think the conservative values that are in place are certainly going to be good for Mississippi. Mississippians have historically, even in a nonpartisan way, have been very appreciative of conservative values. And I think you're going to see more and more of that. And you have to remember, he's only been there 6 months. And so is that a real test card? I'm not sure that really is. So everybody else, if you look down the road, presidential got report cards much later. So I'm not sure that we can really make a decision on exactly how he's doing unless we get further down the road. But for Mississippians, some of the great things that have not been acknowledged, there's been a lot of red tape that's been cut. And so that's important as we're trying to get permits and licenses and businesses and economic development, all those. When you take away a lot of that red tape and that bureaucracy, that helps us grow as a state. And that's what we so desperately need.
So what do you think the next 3+ years looks like for Mississippi under the Trump administration?
I think you'll continue to see some of these core values in the conservative realm put into place. Again, cabinet members are just now getting into place, and so you've got a lot of action that they really hadn't had the opportunity to govern. And so when they start putting policies in place which really get to those principles, I think you'll see a lot more traction in the year from now when we're having this conversation.
We asked Mississippi Senator Roger Wicker about President Trump. He says, quote, when Mississippians went to the ballot box last November, they voted for a president who would put America first. President Trump has not wavered from this message or the policy priorities that go with it. He is committed to keeping jobs here at home and restoring our standing around the world. The president is following through on promises to reinvigorate the economy and to reform Washington. He has worked with those of us in Congress to repeal more than $70 billion in job-killing regulations, and the stock market has reached record highs. Illegal border crossings are down by more than 50%, and ISIS is on the run. Although our work is far from over, the past 6 months are a positive indicator of what is to come. I will continue to work hand in hand with the president and his team to deliver meaningful results for Mississippi families. Joining us now is Bobby Moak, chairman of the Mississippi Democratic Party. He served in the state legislature for 32 years. He is an attorney practicing in Bogue Chitto. Bobby, good to have you with us on that issue.
Thank you very much. Nice
so,
to be here.
What is your assessment of the Trump administration so far?
Well, it's been interesting. Of course, you have comments on both sides whenever you talk about the Trump administration, but he's been there 6 months. Some things are not being handled as maybe we have seen those in the normal political process in the past. But quite honestly, that may have been a reason that a lot of people were drawn to Trump as a candidate, that it was something different. They felt like they needed a change, and that's the person for change, or that's the only option for change that they felt they had at the time. And so from there, we are where we are today.
I mentioned a moment ago that Mississippi is predominantly Republican, have a Republican governor, have had a Republican governor, and tend to vote Republican on a statewide basis. Should it be good and all in the family also to have a Republican president?
You would think that things would go along swimmingly, but that's not always the case. Case in point, roads and bridges. We've had that debate, that fight in the legislature.
At the state level.
At the state level. There's not really been a road and bridge program in effect since Billy McCoy was Speaker. We don't see one now, and our state leaders have told us we don't need an infrastructure program. When Donald Trump is elected president, we're going to get all the federal money coming back. That hasn't happened. It's been stalled. So that's just one of the points that we see where you think you're going to get everything you want, but it's not going to happen.
All right, let's talk about Obamacare, the effort to repeal and perhaps replace Obamacare. What effect would repealing Obamacare have on Mississippi?
I think it would be, if you repealed everything, just dead in the water, it's going to be devastating to our state. First of all, it's going to affect so many people who are on Medicaid. And people have a misconception about Medicaid. 3 out of 4 nursing home residents are on Medicaid. 1 out of 10 veterans are on Medicaid. In Mississippi, usually somebody in the family is working that's on Medicaid. You've got to be elderly, you've got to be disabled, or you've got to be a child to get on Medicaid in Mississippi. Now, we have a large proportion of our population that's on Medicaid and compared to a lot of other states, but that just simply is what it is because our population, a lot are poor. And so you simply are there. So it would be devastating into those hundreds of millions of dollars that come into the state are not going to be turning over in the economy and are going to put some real hardships on folks who have families in nursing homes who are going to be able to do things the way they want to care for their family. It's going to be a lot of that taken away, and Medicaid is a large part of repealing the Obamacare program.
Let's talk about the future now, 3 years down the road, the next 3 years under a Trump administration for Mississippi. What do you see?
It's hard to see. It's hard to see what can happen here in our state, but we've got to take the first 6 months and look at that and sort of say, is this what it's going to be for the next year or the next 3 years? I don't think we can do anything more than that. Mr. Trump is president, and we've got to back up and see what he can do for all of us. But as of right now, those things that he wants to do for all of us are back and forth, and that's why it's put Mississippians, even folks who did support him to some degree, backing off just a little bit, putting Mississippi more at the crossroads of being even on what they think about the Trump administration. So I think that is to be seen, and we will just have to see. Healthcare debate is just going to be huge. That's one of the biggest issues that affects Mississippi. That'll affect our future. Infrastructure will affect our future, and getting jobs here in Mississippi will affect our future. Now, as Democrats, we're going to do our best to try to help all of those things in a positive manner. We're not going to sit here and throw stones, be negative, but when something comes out that we don't like or we don't think is the right approach, we're going to talk about it. We're going to start the conversation at least. Let's talk about these things and not just go along with everything. I think that's what you have to do, and I think that's what we all have to do.
Bobby Moak, chairman of the Mississippi Democratic Party, thank you very much for your insight.
Thank you.
We asked Mississippi Congressman Bennie Thompson about President Trump. He says, quote, President Trump discriminates against and scolds Americans on the grounds of his own insecurities. His constant need to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act will affect the thousands of Mississippians insured through the marketplace across the state, especially in the 2nd Congressional District. Many of the people I represent are in rural and low-income areas, and it is essential that they maintain affordable health care coverage. Let's get straight to the point now with views from both sides of the aisle. Austin Barber is a Republican national strategist. He's the founding partner of the Clearwater Group. Brandon Jones is a Democrat. He's an attorney with the Beria Jones Law Firm and a former member of the Mississippi House. Austin, Brandon, good to have both of you back with us on At Issue. So, Donald Trump, how's he doing?
I'll go first here. I think the most important thing is to realize he's only been president for 6 months. Yes, a lot can be accomplished in 6 months. Yes, they could have accomplished more than they have right now. But I think we got to give him more time, give his administration more time to see what they actually are going to be able to get done. For me, thinking from a political standpoint, that time clock may not be 4 years. It may be 2 years, because obviously at the end of 2 years, from 16 to 18, we're going to have another election. Republicans could be at risk, Brandon, of losing control of the House of Representatives. I don't think they're going to be with any risk of losing control of the U.S. Senate. But if you're President Donald Trump, you've got to get stuff done. If you're Speaker Paul Ryan, you've got to get stuff done before the midterm elections in 2018, because it's essential that they hold on to not only the White House, which they will for 4 years, you're guaranteed that, but also to the House and to the Senate to go get stuff done in the best capacity that they possibly can.
Brandon, your assessment so far?
Well, I think all of us sitting around this table, I care deeply about this country. I care deeply about how we are perceived. I care that we run the type of government that we can all be proud of. And I think that this administration, to Austin's point, has had some of the issues that you would expect an administration to have, but they've had a whole variety of issues that I think are unique to the personalities in this administration. And I think our president has ridiculed his own party members, which has caused dysfunction. He certainly has dwelled too long on his own victory, which is something you don't hear every day. And it's caused the type of stagnation that I think some of us feared whenever he was elected. And so I see this as a fairly ineffective, fairly discombobulated administration. And it's hard to see this group pulling it together and governing. The main issues that they rode into town on already seem a long, long way away from the kind of petty infighting we see every day.
You would talk about what the Trump administration means for Mississippians. First, in terms of health care, there's been a lot of talk in Washington about health care. How does that trickle down to Mississippi?
Well, health care doesn't trickle down right now. I totally disagree with what Bennie Thompson said. Brandon and I are both the owners of small businesses, and what I have seen with my health insurance the past few years since Obamacare was passed is our rates have gone up every every single year. I don't have the flexibility. None of us have the flexibility to shop rates across state lines. I don't have more choices. If you are, utilizing policies that are directly from Obamacare, you don't have a lot of choices there because the providers, the insurance companies, they're dropping out of it. So I just totally disagree that Obamacare was some great system that gives us more choices and better rates. And this is an issue that, honestly, the U.S. Senate did not fix. We saw just a few days ago in the middle of the night that they were one vote short of trying to pass a bill that you may not have agreed with the bill. I may not have agreed with everything with that bill, but it was going to keep the health care debate going in the U.S. Capitol. But instead, it's dead for now, and hopefully that is short-lived because Mississippians need a better health care system than what we have now. It's my opinion, Brandon.
One of the problems with the sideshows that we've had to talk about in these first 6 months of this administration is that this has been devastating on any hopes of a meaningful policy. You can't point to, Senator Wicker did a good job of kind of claiming credit for these different changes. What he was referring to were regulatory changes.
Yes.
This administration and this Congress has been absolutely useless for 6.5 months because we've spent more time talking about Moot, Sean Spicer, who's going to stand at the dais, are they going to be on TV or not? Well, obviously, things like health care suffer. And I think Republicans, with respect to Austin, with all due respect to you and your colleagues, I think that Republicans have lost the moral authority to talk about this issue, frankly. For 7.5 years, we've all had our health care, because we've had our doors beaten down. We've had advertisement after advertisement, campaign after campaign about how Obamacare was failing and Republicans had a plan. Well, what we now know in the fullness of time is that they wrote this plan at lunch, they released it at 10 p.m., and they voted on it at midnight, and they didn't have the bill. And when they didn't have the votes. And when you look at what skinny repeal ultimately was, it was going to take 16 million people with coverage off of coverage. It was going to raise premiums that you and I both have seen issues with by about 20%. And so this was not a final answer. One of the main things it did was to reduce the tax on healthcare equipment. Frankly, I don't think the people who were clamoring about Obamacare gave a rip about the tax on healthcare equipment. This was an inadequate answer any way you slice it, but what it showed is that the emperor really didn't have any clothes. This has been a great political whipping boy for Republicans. It's worked in district after district, and it's worked in a lot of states. But at the end of the day, this wasn't about health care. This was about political theater, and it was exposed this past few weeks.
Brandon said some things that I passionately agree with, and I'm going to try to go in order here. The first thing you said was let me hit health care because you talked about that last. There's no way that I can sit here and defend the process that Republicans have tried to handle the health care bill. They just haven't done a very good job. I hope that they're going to start over, go through the committee process, and be able to get something done over the course of the next year. I think there are a lot of members in the Senate who want to do that, and hopefully we'll get a real product that the public has a chance to vet. And they'll be able to pass something that is meaningful. But when you have a broad and diverse caucus, especially in the House, of very conservative Republicans and moderate Republicans, that is tough to try to come up with a bill to appease everybody. But that's Paul Ryan's job. That's Mitch McConnell's job. They've got to get that done. You said Roger Wicker made this big point very quickly about new jobs created, things that President Trump has done. I think regulations are very important. If you're in the oil and gas industry, if you're in industries that are regulated by the EPA, some of the things that the Trump administration has done sort of behind the scenes from a bureaucratic level are very meaningful to you and hopefully creating good jobs throughout the spectrum, low, middle, and high class earners. I think that's things that don't get a lot of attention because, as you said, and I think you're right, there's too many discussions about the staff, there's too many discussions about what the president tweeted, and then obviously there's too many discussions about what has not happened in Congress.
What about infrastructure, what the Trump administration's impact on infrastructure in Mississippi might be?
Well, to borrow a phrase, this is where the rubber meets the road. I mean, we had our governor, no less than our governor and lieutenant governor and our Speaker of the House, who all pointed to this administration as being hopeful whenever our infrastructure plan here in the state fell apart in the spring. And we all heard them give lip service to this hope that President Trump's, then candidate Trump's, $1 trillion infrastructure plan might somehow help cure some of our ills here in Mississippi. Wow, has that been an abysmal failure? It's essentially what we found out is that President Trump's infrastructure plan consists of a lot of bullet points without a whole lot of meat on the bone. But the one part that was specified was that we would take air traffic controllers out from under the FAA, and that one failed in a congressional committee. And so this administration has been an abysmal failure on infrastructure, which I think is notable because those of us who had our concerns about this administration coming in thought, well, perhaps a real estate guy would appreciate the bricks and mortar element to the infrastructure problem that we've got in this country. And so I think of all of President Trump's early failures and missteps, not having an infrastructure plan that we can even talk about because it really doesn't exist is a problem. And I do think that in Mississippi it causes some reshuffling of the deck because we did put a lot of hopes in having an injection of federal monies to help with some of these bridges and road problems here. We can now safely say, at least in the foreseeable future, that's not going to happen. So whenever the legislature comes back in January, we will be again left with this problem and asking ourselves how we might be able to address it from a state level.
Yeah, I mean, look, infrastructure, I think, is one that would have received bipartisan support on both sides, and I'm surprised they didn't go with it first versus healthcare. And I bet they quickly realized, there's somebody in the back of the room saying, let's get back to infrastructure. The Dems will like this. Republicans will like this. As you said, I'm sure Trump does understand bricks and mortar, roads and bridges, those do matter. So I bet they pivot back to that at some point in time because, yes, it's an issue that all can be on board with. And obviously, if you're in Mississippi and if you're our leadership in Mississippi, you'd like to see them get to this and something done before the 2008 state legislative session, because obviously that's an issue that will continually be problematic for legislatures to try to decide how do we fund this properly in Mississippi. And if there's a fix from the Trump administration, certainly makes it easier for Tate Reeves, Phil Bryant, and Philip Gunn to understand the right move next.
What about taxes? How will the Trump administration stand on taxes, and what's to come affect Mississippi?
Yet to see taxes. Look, I think the big issues they've got to get settled before 2018. If you're out there watching this and you're thinking, I'm going to vote in the congressional elections in 2018, and if you're watching this show, you're probably a likely voter every time there's an election. But I think they've got to cover taxes, which we've heard very little about. They've got to get infrastructure done. They've got to get health care done. Those are sort of the big three for me. I think, look, he knocked it out of the park with his Supreme Court justice pick. I think he was heralded by, well, I'm going to say he was heralded by Democrats, but there weren't Democrats over there who were screaming, no, we can't have this guy. So Supreme Court pick was very good. I don't want to mention that. But taxes, health care, infrastructure, those three things have to get done. And if you can get to immigration and do something that is sensible, that's another big thing to try to get done before 2018, because you can't go into the 2018 election saying, well, you love our Supreme Court justice pick, and we really tried hard on health care, and you can't do that. You got to tackle some of these other issues, including taxes.
Gentlemen, I'd like to get your final thoughts now. Over the next couple of years, will a Trump administration help or hurt Mississippi? Brandon?
I want to see our country succeed, and I think as part of caring about the country and being a committed person that is not going to change residency depending on who wins an election, I want to see success come out of that administrative office. And it doesn't always have to be in policy ways that I agree with, but I would like to see a coherent policy put forward that lifts all boats. And I'm very skeptical that this president can deliver. I'm very skeptical that this Congress can deliver. But I hope for them. I'm going to pray for them. I hope that Democrats that serve in these roles are open. I hope that they don't get so jaundiced and so turned off that they're not coming to the table. Because as we've talked about around this table, our country faces big issues. We didn't mention North Korea. We didn't mention the geopolitical threat that's beginning to build across the world. But Mississippi faces big issues. And as much as our state leaders may want to give lip service to this, how the United States government goes is still how Mississippi's government goes. The two are still inextricably connected. And so I think it matters how well this bunch performs. And I hope they do better. I'm just quite nervous.
So, Austin, over the next few years, hurt or help Mississippi, the Trump administration?
You know, I don't get paid $1 to pat Brandon on the back. But I think what you just said and how you said it, the Republicans and Democrats who do national shows on whatever national network, they ought to listen to your tone. They ought to listen to what you say. You don't agree with Donald Trump. You don't disagree with him 100% of the time, but you just said, and you were very genuine, that you want him to do well. Because if he does well, the country most likely does well. Yep. If he and the Senate and the House don't do well, we don't move forward. And I think you and I have always tried to have this mentality as we talk to Wilson on this show about having a conversation where we're not screaming at each other. I don't agree with you all the time, and you don't agree with me all the time. But we can have these kind of conversations. I just think you should be lauded for how you said that. And I think with how Donald Trump, the things that he does, how it will impact Mississippi, ask me in a year. I hate to say that, but let's find out where we are in a year, because I think that's how long it may take a new health care bill to pass, and taxes and infrastructure and immigration. And we can have little report cards every 9 weeks, but I think in a year, as we move forward to this time next summer, we'll really know, did it help Mississippi having Donald Trump as president and a Republican control in the House and Senate or not?
Yeah.
Austin, Brandon, thank you both. We are out of time. Don't forget you can check out the show on our website, mpbonline.org/issue. And please join us again next Friday night here on MPB for another edition of At Issue. Good night.